So, Fiona, by way of introduction, I'm CMRPC's Regional Housing Coordinator, which is a position that you kind of put forth. If you wouldn't mind just letting everybody here know what's
Sure.
going on, and then we'll do an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So just some background. So this is the first year, it's a pilot of sorts. We decided to enter into an agreement with CMRPC, with Connor Robichaux there to share a regional housing coordinator to help us with our various housing initiatives. Obviously, Grafton, this is nothing new to this group, but Grafton is experiencing an influx of development and significant changes in terms of our housing landscape, and this opportunity came in an ideal time. Josefa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there is Grafton and 5 other communities that are involved. I think 5.
Yes, there's 5.
Yes, 5 other communities that are participating. And then next year we will meet to basically vote to continue to be a part of the program and stay enrolled. But basically, Josefa is here tonight to basically introduce herself and some of the priorities. I did want this evening to be really all about what the trust wants and needs from Josefa going forward. I did say, technical assistance to the Housing Trust is one of the top priorities, as well as, independent research, helping us implement our soon to be new housing production plan. But with that, I would like to introduce Josefa. She is joining us from Cambridge Housing Authority. So Josefa, did you want to just say just explain a little bit about your background and what brought you to this position?
Sure. So I'm Josefa Chowdhury, and I come from, or my previous workplace was from Cambridge Housing Authority. And I ended up, I guess, moving more towards the central Massachusetts region because my house is here in Fitchburg. So that was basically the gist of me looking. But I'm very excited to work with Grafton and CMRPC. I have a degree in urban planning and sustainable community development, as well as before Cambridge Housing Authority, I've worked in various cities for housing in terms of housing production plans and things along that line. And also I have worked in Bangladesh as well. So that's a little bit about me in terms of their development there, because they had a huge refugee crisis that was there. So I still kind of do help out a little bit in Bangladesh as well here and there. But that's a little bit about me and my background. But yeah, I'm looking forward to assisting as much as possible here.
So just quickly, I'll open up just a couple questions from the trust, but take us through the logistics of this. So the collaboration between CMRPC and the trust it's also the planning board and the ZBA, which is going to be able to use this the hours.
Yeah, I haven't really, the primary group that Josefa would help would be the trust. I wasn't, obviously if Josefa needs to, if there's a particular project that's in front of the ZBA or the planning board, or a specific need by another, regulatory group, we could use her time to assist. It's really kind of up to the town what we need her to focus on and what her priorities should be.
Okay. And is it just like a rolling hour count? You're going to give us a few hours, Josefa, a week, and as we need them?
Yes, I believe so. I think there's contracted hours per city, I think, in terms of that. I think the 5 cities are Shutesbury, Auburn, Mendon, Grafton, and Berlin.
Okay. And how would you like the interaction to occur? Do you want us to funnel through like Amber if we have emails, questions, or something like that, or will you entertain individual trust members at their leisure and yours? Like, how do you want us to communicate with you?
I mean, if you all want to email me, you can, or if you want to email me individually, I have no problem with either or. I'm just more so here to assist. I did kind of go over the 5-year plan So I think it would be ideal to maybe like set some goals, responsibilities for the first year, and then keep on going from there, I guess.
Okay.
And then once those goals are aligned, we can just move forward, I guess. Maybe. I don't know.
That's fine. Well, this is kind of a first for us as well. So,
Yeah, same here. So I think with the 5 tons, I'm trying to initiate that in terms of like, okay, what are the goals? What are some doable goals that we have for the first year, and then move forward from that way.
well, this is a convenient time. So, I would say from our perspective, coming to some of the outreach meetings and taking part in our housing production plan, which Karen, of course, is here to speak about tonight, especially at the point where we're at now, it would be a good opportunity to get a real sense of what we're doing here and what we're going to want to get accomplished. So if we can use some of those hours just to, have you available, especially with your background to answer questions that might come up in the public setting.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I was thinking more so too, actually, in terms of like for my first year goals as well. I mean, I have like a set of goals, but I want to hear everybody out and then kind of come to a consensus in what is doable. Yeah, I think one of them is actually outreaching and helping with community, or like community development that way, for sure.
Does anybody else have any questions? Or comments, concerns, anything?
Nope.
All right. Just,
Bruce, really quick. I'm also happy to help be a liaison. I know that Amber probably has a lot on her plate, and happy to help and keep the communication going if there's particular projects in the trust. If somebody from the trust wants to reach out after the fact, and then Jasifa and I can coordinate whatever works for the group. But again, I think that Jasifa's role really will and focus really will be this trust as well as the housing production plan, and I can see her dedicating majority of her time to those endeavors. So
Okay.
just
Wait, tell you what, now that we've met, I'll let the members that aren't here watch the recording, and then we'll digest it a little bit, and then in October we'll rally up, and if we have any further comments for how we want to help structure it, then we'll bring it up then.
awesome.
Before we get too far along, we have a new member with us tonight. Nicole, did you want to introduce yourself? And then we'll
Sure.
introduce ourselves as well.
Hi, I'm Nicole Ethier. I've lived in Grafton for about 7 years now. My husband actually grew up here, so his family has been in this community for a long time. We moved out here when my son was about 2.5. He's 10 now, so love the community. My background is actually in the retail industry. I was a merchandise buyer for about a decade, and then I was a director of planning at an e-commerce site for about a decade. And in the last year, I made the leap and got out of the corporate rat race and started my own business as a real estate agent. So I've jumped into being an entrepreneur, which has brought in a whole new set of challenges, but all good.
Great. So we have 3 members who aren't here yet, Eric Swenson and Dan Kusher, and then Brittany as well. They might be in here later, but you'll see him at one of the next meetings. And then to my right is Andy Jefferson. He is our select board rep. And then to my left is Ed Prisby, and I am Bruce Spinney. Ed and I have been perennial trust members for a while now.
Great.
Great. All right. So now moving on to the meat of the agenda, so to speak. Karen, thank you for coming tonight. Everybody's got or should have reviewed a copy of the draft, and then we have a couple handouts here as well. These are all part of your packet, Nicole, so you can probably find them. There's a strategic planning list and a couple of other things.
Thank you.
So,
It's
Karen.
that strategies table on page 6
Yeah,
of the plan.
yeah. I thought that the best use of the time tonight would be to go over the specific strategies that are included in the draft HPP, and the table table 1-1 basically is just a quick summary. And I thought I'd go one by one and just briefly describe the strategy, and then we can get any questions and comments from you folks. And by the end of the meeting, I should be able to, with Fiona's comments, anybody else's comments, revise the draft so that we're ready to go for, put it on the website and have it ready ahead of the second community meeting that we also should discuss this evening. Does that work for you guys?
Sure.
Just with one brief caveat is we have a new member here with us tonight. So can you give us just a brief overview and outline of this process, where you're at now, Karen? Just
Sure.
So we all have an
Sure.
understanding.
Good,
of,
good idea. Good idea. Welcome, Nicole. And welcome, Jasifa, too. We had Fiona and I had a conversation with Jasifa this week, and I just think the timing of this is great. While we're kind of finishing the housing production plan and moving towards implementation, this is just great timing to have some support. You folks have been pretty much, volunteer boards really can make more progress when they do have more staff support. So this is just terrific. Anyway, so this is, I think, is it the third or the fourth housing plan that I've done with you folks? And we are doing this plan per state requirements that are pretty prescriptive of what has to be included in a housing plan in order for the state to approve it. And then after approval, if the town produces 0.5% of its year-round housing stock, it can be what is called safe harbor or technically certified, against having to accept 40B applications that it deems inappropriate and that they don't address local needs. So in addition to having good planning regarding the town's future housing agenda, there are some benefits through how it's having a housing production plan approved by the state. So we've actually completed the first several sections of the plan, the major component being a housing needs assessment, looking at analyzing demographic, economic, and housing characteristics and trends, and pinpointing certain priority housing needs. What we were talking about tonight are the strategies that are proposed to address those needs. And these strategies come from a number of sources, including some of the previous plans that were done, strategies that were included in those previous plans and not implemented or only partially implemented. As well as we had on June 7th, we had a community housing workshop. Got a lot of input from folks about what they think are the priority actions that the town should be proactive on in the next few years. These plans have a 5-year term. And then just discussions among, the housing trust members and staff. We've had, and some interviews, certainly kind of come to this list of strategies that are included in that table. The idea is not to have a laundry list of every strategy we think that might have some effect on promoting housing affordability and diversity in the town, but to really focus on those strategies where the town can potentially really make some progress over the next 5 years, and have come up through this planning process. So tonight that's in my mind kind of taking you up to where we are tonight and trying to get some input on what's included in the draft, and then we'll make whatever revisions and then have another community meeting. Both the planning board and the select board have to approve the plans before they're submitted to the state. and the state has like up to 90 days to review it and approve the plan. They're doing it much, much faster. So that's a good thing. Anyway, is there something that I missed that you folks want to bring up
No, that's
to Nicole? Okay. That planning process in a nutshell. So anyway, do you want to just start with the first category of strategies? We've grouped these strategies by either housing development and preservation. Another group was zoning related, and another was basically kind of outreach and operational. So the first strategy that's included is to foster the development of town-owned property. This is the state's housing production requirements have 5 categories of strategies that must be addressed in the plan. And one of the requirements is to identify municipally owned property that has the potential for producing some amount of affordable housing. So that is a requirement. And the town has real history and there's precedent for doing this.
Karen, can I ask you a question about that?
Want to do that, huh?
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
When you say we were mandated by the state to identify town-owned
Yep.
property,
Yep.
what's the mandate in terms of pursuing town-owned property? It's one thing to identify it. We can all sit here and identify it. I can pick lots off
You
the
have
map.
to include in the plan a strategy that identifies some town-owned property, or it shows that it is part of your the 5-year housing agenda to work with. Because of 25 Worcester Street satisfies that more. That's a really good example how the town is pursuing that. So
Well, to be
we're
fair,
fine.
the town.
We're golden on that front.
Just to stop you for a second, though, Karen. To be fair, the town didn't pursue that. The Affordable Housing Trust didn't pursue that. An individual pursued that, and now the Affordable Housing Trust has it. The only thing the Affordable Housing Trust did over the course of the past decade to identify town-owned property was with Hudson Street.
That's great.
And Bruce pursued that, and was met with all sorts of resistance from the town. So I just want to make sure that going forward, the trust is clear on what its obligation is here, because we can identify and pursue town-owned property and meet with stiff resistance and get nowhere with it. And I just want to make sure that, having done that, we've satisfied.
The state really looks at good faith efforts to implement at least parts of the plan.
Okay.
So there are no demerits for not satisfying or actually implementing the actions that are included in the plan. Explain to me, I assumed since it was the high school that it is town-owned land, and whether the Housing Trust was involved or not is really not, an identification. It really is not a huge deal. But going forward, you folks are involved in the project, and that's important.
So that's what
right?
that's what I want to make clear. So
Yeah.
it came up at a town meeting in 2020. It got put onto the town warrant that the land was donated from the town to the Affordable Housing Trust for the purposes of senior housing development. But I want to make sure that to comply with the housing production plan and to make sure these units get into SHI, that if there's a specific obligation on the part of this this trust to annually be identifying and pursuing town-owned property, that we're doing
No.
that, because I don't want to fall afoul of that, and then all of a sudden the state says, well, these units you developed aren't part of the SHI because you didn't meet this criteria.
Yeah, and also, Fiona's done a little extra research. We know that Graves Engineering did some some feasibility work on property on Hudson and Millbury Streets. She has a little bit more information on that. There was some engineering work done on the Suzanne Terrace property a while back.
Yeah, that was 2000.
So the Housing Trust did try to make some efforts to do some feasibility work on a number of properties. And I think it was, another one was what, 395 Providence Road. There were a number of them. It just turned out that site conditions weren't appropriate for one reason or another to, basically promote development on those areas.
Okay.
So a conscious effort to do these things, given that the old college try is going to be enough for the state.
Yeah. Well, and you've got a project underway. You've got a developer. You've made a lot of progress on 25 Worcester. It's going to happen, right?
The state money is going to start flooding in anytime.
Yep.
There you go. Well, it'll take a little while to, go through the queue, but, it seems like that's going to be a really important project for the town. And that is something we highlighted in the plan. So, and also we added something to the effect of, if there are some foreclosures, tax title properties become available, instead of auction them off, to potentially group them in an RFP and have them developed as affordable housing is another option. And some communities actually bond their CPA money and acquire properties. So there are some other options down the road to consider.
Karen, I had a
Yeah.
question just as a follow-up. I mean, was the data for Grafton supportive of including that? I mean, I feel I not without looking at the numbers and remembering off the top of my head. I mean, is there a decent a number of foreclosures in Grafton that would warrant? I mean, I think that it's a good idea.
I
but
think the data that we collected on foreclosures they were kind of mortgage foreclosures.
Mhm.
This would be tax foreclosures.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So that's something it'd be useful to see if there's anything in the pipeline, and if they go through land court, there's a whole process of doing that. Typically,
town
as
hasn't
properties
demonstrated
become more valuable, fewer and fewer properties are available to tax title, because people will, at the last moment, pay off the taxes to avoid having the properties taken. But nevertheless, there are sometimes properties that can become available, so it's useful to monitor.
Yeah,
Okay,
my
yeah.
recollection is our collection rate is somewhere around 95%. We do pretty good.
Yeah.
There hasn't been an appetite for tax taking in quite some time. And the ones that were taken, so to speak, sat dormant for 30, 35 years. And
Yeah, but you know what, guys? You've got money. I mean, if some properties actually became available, you did an RFP, you got a developer or a contractor to do something, make the improvements or whatever, you could, subsidize units for a first-time home buyer, or for, small rentals, something like that. So that, if they became available, there are ways to be creative and actually utilize them, take advantage. Anyway, that was on the town-owned property. That wasn't the main focus, but we did provide a number of options to think of down the road. The other piece, which is like the big number, is to partner with developers on privately owned property. Now, clearly, the pipeline that you have is rather staggering when it comes down to the 40B developments that you have. So we included some of those. We enlisted all of them someplace in the plan, but in the production goals, we included the ones that seem to be moving forward in some way. But I think importantly, it's my understanding that the Housing Trust has been involved in kind of early review of 40B proposals, and that we suggest in the plan that in any proposal that involves affordable housing, that the Housing Trust have early meetings to provide some guidance to developers on a whole range of ways to make development, in greater compliance with local priorities and preferences, and to deal with other issues that
So
that
Karen,
might, yeah,
for that particular strategy number two, it's something that I think we should add language that kind of specifies the role to encourage a policy being established on the town's part to actually encourage that dialogue, that pre-lib dialogue, that pre-affordability dialogue.
Isn't it in our
We-
bylaw?
we do specifically recommend that it be expanded to include that. I'll make
I
sure
guess what I'm
that,
saying is I
that
don't
it's
want to put a
stronger.
recommendation in. I want to just put the language that they should adopt that says if something comes with some affordability component, the Affordable Housing Trust, if it currently exists, should have some part. Because we get about, I don't know, a quarter of what
Yeah.
we see before they're at a point where we can have any, substantive dialogue. And in the past, I guess that's completely fine because we were never really in a position where we could act on anything anyways
Yeah.
to be supportive in any substantive way, but now we are.
Yeah,
So,
I'll make sure that there's that specificity in that,
well, that, we are,
in that particular strategy. Absolutely.
All right.
So then we, mention a couple of other ways that the town can be helpful in promoting development that makes sense for the community. And then pursue mixed use and transit oriented development. I mean, you folks are, been doing a fabulous job. And we really did emphasize in the plan that, that there was a real intention on the part of the town to try to focus development in areas that were appropriate in multifamily housing and mixed use, and particularly where infrastructure was available. And, certainly the overlay districts that you folks have done to really try to promote development in those areas. I think some of that will be done through, through EA, but we tried to kind of emphasize the importance of promoting development in those logical places where existing zoning is amenable. And then support scattered site infill development. There's all this discussion of the missing middle, where we're talking about, I think there's two missing middles. One is that there's a missing middle between single family detached units and apartment complexes, and the missing middle between, potentially, low income housing or subsidized housing and high end housing. And it's that there's an opportunity to, in these kinds of infill development in existing neighborhoods, to create housing types that might not be the single family detached unit, but they're more harmonious to the smaller scale development and might provide some different types of housing to deal with kind of a wider range of incomes and a wider range of housing types to address wider range of housing needs. And we give examples of those. Certainly ADUs are one, group homes are another one, duplexes, two-family houses, small pocket neighborhoods, little pocket neighborhoods in existing areas. So that's another recommendation. Also, to introduce and promote housing rehabilitation initiatives.
Karen?
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off. I can't see my raised hand up there. Oh, sorry about that. So the just before we move on from number 4, this should probably also be duplicated under a zoning strategy, right?
Yeah, and we address, we in the plan, we will refer in the zoning to the units that are actually created through the zoning would be counted under scattered site. So,
Okay.
so there is a reference back and forth. these top category of recommendations really kind of deal with production units, and the zoning strategies and the outreach, et cetera, are in support of producing those units.
Okay.
And so that's how it works. Okay. Good question. Introduce and promote housing rehab initiatives. There are a couple of suggestions about obtaining funding, like community development block grant funding, to establish a housing rehab program. There's a suggestion about potentially creating a small repair grant program that other communities have done. Small grants of typically about $5,000 to provide financial support for important health and safety repairs in existing homes that are owned by qualifying homeowners. Those have been relatively successful. You can't use CPA money, however, because CPA funds can only be used for properties that have been acquired or built with CPA money. So towns have used other resources, but it's something to consider. And then we list a whole number of existing housing programs and services that can help promote important improvements in homes, and those should continue to be promoted within the community, so people are aware of them and basically get their fair share of those services and programs. And then to create a rental assistance program. This is starting out just kind of $10,000 that will go to the housing authority. It's kind of in the beginning stages, but will cover some expenses for new tenants at housing authority that might not have enough funding to support the first month of rent. That's typically what's going to be included in a very relatively small amount of money. So it's only going to cover a small number of people, but it can really be meaningful for those households and those tenants. So we added that there. And thanks, Fiona. I did contact Amanda and she gave me some information, but she gave you a lot more information than she gave me. So that was good.
To your point, I'm wondering if we should modify the language to say bolster the Grafton Housing Authority's rental assistance program, because it is created technically. They're still working on developing a formal application.
Yeah, I thought create also at this point, because when we started, we thought it was like, it was a lot less it was more nebulous about what it was. But I was even thinking of implement, because the town is going to be involved in actually partnering with the housing authority. So maybe the word is to implement the program at this point instead of create, because
if that's agreeable.
There's still some work to be done on it.
Can I actually hop in here on that? Just on strategies on part A, we are already efforting creating a rental assistance program, so that can probably be changed to years 1 through 3 as opposed to 3 through 5.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So
good point. Good point.
The rest of the stuff, especially concerning the years, and I want to point this out. And I don't mean to nitpick, but I want to make sure that people who read this have a realistic understanding of what it is we're doing. On page 38, we have the current inventory, and I just want to read this. Grafton is at 5.53% of level affordability, about halfway to meeting its 10% state affordability threshold under Chapter 40B. Karen, when you first did yours over a decade ago, the first housing production plan with us, that's where we were, okay? And every few years we do this, and every few years we put down, it's going to take 1 to 2 years to produce all these units, and they don't materialize for one reason or another. That's why I try to stay away from words like pipeline and 1 to 2 year expectations, because really there's no pipeline. there's basically this sort of nebulous pool of proposals that jump into the pool and then for whatever reason get escorted out of the pool. And we're still sort of stuck hovering around here with a few good ideas and a few good proposals, but particularly where we're waiting for privately owned developers to get out of their own way and for the town to get out of its own way sometimes. These projects do take forever. And a good example is 25 Worcester Street. That property was deeded to the trust back in 2020. It is now 2023. I was a young man then, now I'm getting old. And I swear, all I want is to see that property developed, and I'm out of here. Like, I want one of these things done. And it's been 12 years since I've been on this trust, and we haven't got one. So I guess I would change the 1 to 2 years to 1 to 4, because that's a little bit more realistic. And on the rental assistance program, that should be 1 to 3, because we're already working on that, and Lord knows how long
Yes,
that's
you're
gonna take.
absolutely right. Will do.
Is there any particular emphasis that the state is going to put on to the time frame for implementation, or is that
No.
just okay?
It seems that, you can count the units as soon as the comp permit is issued. So for example, on 25 Worcester Street, I mean, it might not be completed until, a few years down, but the comp permit, the LIP, can be, it seemed to me it was realistic that would be approved within the next 1 or 2 years.
No, I don't think. Well, in that particular case specifically, I don't think they're going to go until 2026 for that round of funding. So I think how they're scheduling it and how they're approaching it is 2025 or 2026 for their funding from DHCD or whatever they're calling themselves now.
But they have to have the permit done before they actually apply for funding, because they can't apply for the financing unless they can show HLC that they have the permitting in place.
No, I get that. What I'm saying is that if they're looking, they're not looking for the next 2 years to initiate that process. So I think if it's
So you have a
2026
developer on board, don't you?
We do. Yep.
And you're going to wait on the permitting? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, we're entering into a P&S with them, which has taken some time now. And then they were our only bid for the RFP that qualified. And so when they came in to speak with us, that was their horizon. So
Okay. All right. So I'll change it to 1 to 4.
that'd be perfect.
That's fine. Any other years any other timeframes you want to change?
Outside of the rental assistance, unless anybody else. I mean, this is a small thing. I don't think this is too big of a deal.
I would just probably do it for all of them on a 1 through 4, except for the rental assistance. I think
Well,
pursuing the mixed use.
these plans are 5 years, so 1 to 4 seems like, so what? Why have a time frame if you have 5-year term? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I guess that's what I was saying too. Why have a time frame at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's our ongoing mission, but I think realistically, I mean, specific to pursuing mixed use and transit oriented development, we want to get that the zoning reform done specifically around the railways now. But how long it takes us to actually put units in there? I mean, I'm hoping that 25.
Yeah, you
units
don't
is-
know.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
don't know,
you
right?
don't know.
So I mean, I'm
Right.
hoping 25 units is on the low side, frankly, but you never know.
Yeah. No, I get that too. The thing is, these are SHI units, so so if you have an affordability requirement, it's going to be
You're right, 100
it's not
units or
going to
so.
be the same as 40B, where all rental units count.
Right.
It's a little different calculation,
Right.
so hopefully it will be more than 25 units. All right, and then can we move on to zoning?
Yes,
Sure.
we can.
So the first one, and you just mentioned, is complying with Section 3A of the Zoning Act, and you folks have made a lot of progress on that. And Fiona mentions that you're thinking October, this October for town meeting, which is pretty aggressive and earlier than a lot of other communities are doing. So kudos for you figuring it out. But there, it seems to me that you had done some such good work on establishing these overlay districts that this was an easier job for you than it is for a lot of other communities.
Yes, that's correct. There was really not any significant changes to the underlying zoning that we needed to make other than having to adjust the affordability percentage for the portion of the village mixed use South Grafton district that we're using for compliance. And that was solely because the state
Yeah,
was saying we are not going to accept anything over 20%. We had to produce an economic feasibility analysis to prove that it works, and it does. Even works at 25% is what they found. So
yeah, that's amazing.
But despite it working at 25%, we still cannot we cannot use that area for
That's right.
for
Yes,
compliance.
they cap it at 20. Yeah.
Right.
I get
Yep.
that. So lots of, so that's the real positive move. And then, and the state will love to see that.
Mhm.
Modify the ADU bylaw. So we learned that there are permitting since 1988. Fiona or Amber dug up some information. There were like 72, I think, 72 ADUs have been permitted since 1988, but they were all permitted for occupancy of family members. What this recommendation is to really try to modify the current bylaw to better promote its use. These are not the silver bullets, not going to be, it's kind of a niche type of unit, but for some people, they really make sense. And they do, there are numbers of public benefits that can go towards trying to create more. And so we offer a number of models and suggestions about ADU changes, bylaw changes. And then to amend the flexible development bylaw. This has been in previous plans. I think the idea is that, cluster zoning makes so much sense. It's smart. I think you have one project now that's is going through this, but the bylaw is constraining. It should be revisited to look at how it can become more effective in promoting affordable housing and providing other incentives for its use. And so we've included that. And to allow affordable housing on non-conforming lots. There was a question whether to include this or not, but I think it does relate a bit to the scattered site development piece. Some communities have, there are lots that don't meet all the dimensional requirements in zoning, but could be developable and could provide some, smaller units on smaller lots or smaller units where the setbacks are close but not completely there. So once again, suggest some other model bylaws that might be looked at and some consideration given. And some of this could be the incentive for, providing some subsidies to make these units affordable. And that would be a positive thing. Any questions on zoning?
Not a question, just reiterating my strong support for B4. There's a significant number of lots that were in existence before our zoning was created in 1986. So just, I happy to hear what the trust thinks, but I just wanted to say, this absolutely should be in there. And I'm definitely interested. I mean, I think I agree with all of these, but yeah, especially number 4, I think that's something that we really need to look at.
Good.
Actually,
And then, go
if I could
ahead.
just jump in there, I just, for the benefit of the audience and people who might be reading along, what do you mean by non-complying lots?
They don't meet all of the dimensional requirements in the zoning. So they might be a little smaller. One of the setbacks might be a little, might not meet the exact standards. So they tend to be just a little off from what's required.
there's a lot of incontinuity with how some of our zoning interacts with one another. So like if you have OLI in a particular place, but it abuts residential in the back, doesn't matter what the residential is, you're limited on what you can do with the back 100 feet
Right.
of your property in OLI. There's a ton of that stuff in there that, nobody knows about until they try to do something. Then you try to do something and you can't.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's why going through this bylaw would be kind of a helpful exercise to figure out how you could kind of fix some of that.
Thank you.
And then last two, conduct outreach and advocacy for affordable housing, which is kind of a no-brainer, but it's important. And I think it kind of, by including it, it emphasizes the Housing Trust's commitment to having kind of an inclusive and transparent process when it is proposing any new initiatives and keeping people in the loop and offering opportunities for people to participate in any kind of process and a new initiative, as well as really getting information that's helpful on existing programs and services, how all residents or certainly both homeowners and renters might benefit from certain programs and services, either locally or regionally or through the state. That one is important. And then the second one is to continue to capitalize the housing trust so as opportunities can arise, the trust could be in a position to take advantage of them. Now, you guys have a lot of money, but it's still important that the town.
Well, to be clear, as soon as this GSX deal goes through, we're not going to have almost any money.
Yeah, we
How much is committed to the GSX? How much is that?
What have we got at 1.8?
1.8 million.
1.8 million.
I think
Okay.
when the project comes to completion, if everything goes the way it's supposed to go, we'll have about 900,000 plus the residual money that comes in from the reserve from CPA. I'm guessing we'll be probably about a 1.1, 1.2 million.
All right. Maybe
Not
we just don't include the balance of what you have in your current balance, but just stress the importance of continuing.
As long as
to
we don't say
provide
in the housing
folks with
production plan
funding.
that we're flush.
Yeah, I
What?
mean, obviously there's a lot of balls in the air, and property development in Massachusetts is notoriously expensive, which is, it's a little bit of circular. It's like, well, that's why we're here. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the money came from the Pulte settlement funds 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
And we're unlikely to see anything like that ever again. So
We're more likely to see 40, 30 something thousand a year coming in from the 10% reserve.
Yeah.
Whatever that stays at for the next, and who knows what the CPA funding is going to look like over the next decade. So probably less and less every year, but who knows?
Who knows? That's right. It's kind of best guesses at this point.
So
So that's it. I mean, the question for you guys: are we missing something here? Is there anything else that you would like to see as part of this package? I mean, obviously, all these things have to be approved. You have to be prioritized and approved through their normal regulatory channels. There's no merits for not implementing these recommendations. But
So Karen,
and-
C kind of strikes on a couple of things that I wanted. We talked about these months ago when we started this process. Is the housing production plan as a document himself is going to, by and large, go unread in town. So there'll be some players that are interested in it. Probably the people in this room, perhaps some of the people on the planning board, maybe a few select board members, and like one or two random people out of the 12,000 voters we have in town will pick it up. So that being said, as far as a tool, which I believe this should be for the trust moving forward, is especially seeing that we have some hours from CMRPC that can kind of do some of this work for us, is putting the tools together to help a new member, let's say Nicole, just got on the board, has some ideas about what she wants to encourage in a particular zone in town. but really no way to identify how to even go about any of that. So, what the zoning looks like, who to talk to. So we make references in a lot of places to like group homes, for example. But if you were to ask anybody how do you do that, it's nearly impossible because you're going to go through 5 different layers before you find somebody who actually does it. And then you're probably going to know 6 more layers before somebody who actually accomplished something in that particular business environment. So if we could, provide some, definitions in there, like a cheat sheet, so to speak, who the major players are, some of the developers, kind of like a few site examples in there that will direct people to, I want to do this. Well, here are some, local agencies that handle that. Here's some private
Well,
entities that
in
handle
the
that.
appendix, we have a list of local regional housing entities.
Yeah, that's fine, but
Then we have a glossary of terms too. I mean,
I
so
guess
it
what
would
I'm
be
saying is
helpful
I just
for
want
me
a
to
cheat
know-
sheet right up in front.
So I don't know who's
Up front?
speaking, but I do agree, like maybe like a summary of, because I mean the production plan's long. So you're right. I don't think someone who's like an average person is going to go ahead and spend their time to read on it and to understand the resources that are coming from it. So maybe I don't know who's speaking, but I'm thinking maybe like a 5-page like sheet on like this is what it is, a little summary, some of the sites that's going on that is up and coming. Is that what you're more so talking about?
Yeah, just
So that's just like an easy like outreach kind of a thing. Because I do agree with you. When I was printing this out, I was like, this is really invasive and it's very long and it's very thorough. Which is great. But like if they're like, okay, now I want to learn more about it, then maybe then that's there as a
yeah, Karen,
resource.
I love your work and I go through it and I've read the documents. I can go through and find this stuff pretty easily, but I've been doing this for like 15 years now.
Yeah.
So
well, that's why the executive summary tends to be pretty important.
and that's why I emphasize in the beginning.
You don't want it to get too long.
Well, that's kind of what
You told me you didn't want it long.
Well, no, I wanted it direct, like Cliff Notes, I think is what I mentioned back then. Like just not so much a summary of the housing production plan itself, but a broad overview of the resources that are available, something that you're not going to search in the appendix for. Just a cheat sheet up front.
Okay, so an example would be resources. You mean like links to state or? I mean, I'm trying to
Maybe
To be
maybe
honest,
like a summary, like maybe like I'm thinking more of like a 5-page or like a 10-page of like, okay, a summary, this is what's up and coming, to like, okay, this is who you could reach out to if you're more interested in it. Just like I get it, like the 12,000 residents that are there, if they're interested in knowing, yeah, maybe like Nicole can speak on it. How was it, I guess, for you just to understand the housing trust and everything and then kind of go from there? Maybe if you can give some output on that.
Maybe if I looked at this larger document first, I could give you a little bit more feedback. I honestly have just looked at this stuff in the last day or so. So it's all kind of new to me, but
Karen,
I'd be happy to dig a little deeper and give some feedback.
Karen, I tell you what, I don't want to tax you with any more, and I don't want to take up any more time tonight. So why don't I spend some time with our new CMRPC rep and kind of put my thoughts to, in a little broader perspective, and then perhaps her and I can work on it a little bit, and then we can provide the input to you to populate it.
Okay.
Aaron, I think that the point overall is that the average person who's not an affordable housing trust member, who's been on the trust for 15 years or is like a real estate agent, et cetera, just making, an upfront snapshot, easily digestible. Hey, this is the document. This is the typical processes. This is how you can get involved. Like a cliff, yeah, exactly what Bruce is saying, like a cliff notes, so the average person can pick up this document and not have to, be a housing expert.
Okay,
We can get somewhere with it. We got time to. So
Okay.
now we get free hours from CMRPC, so might as well use it.
May I know who's speaking so that I can
It's
like
Bruce.
Bruce,
Bruce, okay. Sorry, so that I can get in contact with you.
All right,
Thank you.
Karen, I didn't mean to
sounds
hijack.
good.
Does anybody else have any comments on the strategy, how it's set up?
Nope, that's fine.
Okay.
We can move on to the second thing here.
I would just say one page would be good. Clip notes.
Yeah,
Oh, you want a one-page thing?
yeah, just
Yeah.
small font. It's fine. We'll fit it all.
All right.
Housing for dummies.
No, no, no. Oh, okay. I think what you've decided is fine, and whatever I can do to be helpful, let me know.
There's layers of accessibility. One
Right.
page for a person who wants to read one page. There's a lengthy executive summary, and then there's a whole bunch of other detail if you want it.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's true.
That's perfect. I should have let Eric talk.
So we also just wanted to talk a little bit about the second community meeting where we will present the plan. And you know, typically what we've done is do a PowerPoint presentation that goes through kind of the key takeaways from the housing plan, and then facilitate a discussion on comments and questions. And then we'll make whatever changes are needed and present the plan to the planning board and select board. I think what we've done in the past and what's worked in other communities, if it's possible to do, it may not be possible given scheduling, but it's always to do a special meeting where the planning board and the select board are both there to get a presentation on the plan and can decide either that evening or at their next meeting to approve the plan so we can submit it to the state.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think we've done
Yeah,
that before in the past. That's how we've typically
Yeah.
operated.
Yeah.
Amber, is there anything in that chat group?
You know, we could also do the public hearing, the public meeting at that same joint meeting. So we could have the joint planning board and select board meeting and then have notification and try to have it as really try to welcome the community at the same time if you think that that's going to be efficient too, or we do it separate. It's up to you.
The fewer meetings, the better.
Well, my only concern is that if we glean, a good amount of feedback and their revisions to the plan are called for,
Right.
Gotcha.
we need time to incorporate them.
That's a good point, Fiona.
But the
So-
joint meeting is ideal. Yes, that makes perfect sense, and I don't see any issues with that. In terms of scheduling, I think we'll need to give ourselves a good amount of lead time so that I can advertise. October is challenging for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
Obviously, town meeting. There's also like not that this is should make or break our decision, but we also have a master plan workshop that's coming up where we'll probably be getting some good feedback about housing. So I'd like to try and stagger those workshops.
Well, just let me, whatever schedule works for you, hopefully it'll be fine with me. I think I might be going away for a week in November, but otherwise I'm around.
Okay. I mean, it's up to the trust. I mean, if early November seems like it's too late, I definitely want to hear from the trust, but that is kind of what I was thinking.
Late October, early November.
That's fine.
October 19th is the next master plan review or meeting. So that
Yep.
would give yourself a couple weeks to kind of outline everything that was discussed there, and they can put it into a package for this. So say the first couple weeks of November.
Yep.
And then Amber, could you? So it's going to be the planning board, us, and the select board. So there's 20 people. So we'll do a send out a survey, see which ones can work.
Sure.
Is this something that we can do on a select board night? So at least we know where you're gonna be.
We've been light, so I don't see why not.
All right. Is it? I gotta reach out to Matt. Okay. And then planning board, what's your November look like?
It's light right now.
Okay.
That's probably going to change.
So if you're gonna do an additional meeting, this is probably gonna be an hour, hour and a half at least. Anyways,
Mhm.
so, okay. There won't be much other stuff that you could do on that night. Great. Karen, did you want to go through table 4 briefly? We got the addition that's kind of commented up. I don't know how broadly we want to go into this, but
Page is table 4.
I'll pull it up.
it's basically the breakdown of the years and, you know, what we're trying to accomplish in those years.
Projections.
Yeah. And the only reason why this is
Those are my best guesses, so,
I've never in the past given these things any weight because, you know,
Right.
realistically
Right.
speaking, I know we have to have something. And
Right.
if I remember correctly, when we approved this when I was on the board the last time, nobody really had any thoughts to it. It's like, okay, well, you got to put something, so you just put something.
yeah, exactly. You know.
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question? So is this the current working 5-year program and the other one is go forward strategies?
So the other
What's
one
the
is,
difference between these two?
yeah, the other one is strategies to develop housing, and this one appears to be a projection of how much housing we expect to be developed and the projects that would come online within the next 5 years. You know,
So same time frame, just one's strategies and one's
That's-
actually like how you would implement it.
This is based on the strategies. How many units do we think will actually be
Okay.
produced?
Okay.
And we have to include it as part of the plan, the housing production guidelines requirements. 39 units per year.
right, which we never meet. I mean, in terms of
Yeah,
anything
you know,
from the
yeah.
trust. But, you know, for my part, as far as projections go, generally, this is my philosophy. I like to underpromise and overdeliver. Particularly with regard to the Affordable Housing Trust, if we start telling people there are a lot of units that come online that are just speculation, it's all the more reason for people to resist actual tangible projects that come along the line, because they say, oh, well, look what you have in your quote unquote pipeline, when it's not really accurate. So then I think the notes here are well taken. If there's something that we don't think is going to come online in 2024, it should go down to 2025. I think there's a note for 2025. I think 25 Worcester Street probably should scoot down to 26. If it happens to be that it comes up to 25, then great. But if not, then that would be more accurate. I think for people reading this that want to get some understanding, some vague understanding of what it is we hope to do, I want to give them an accurate one.
Okay.
So this one can be a little bit living and breathing too. If anybody wants to, you know, go through this and has some insight into a particular project that's here, whether you're on the select board or have some understanding of it, just send an email to the appropriate parties.
Yeah,
These are
Karen, just
your
one thing
comments.
to note, I guess. I mean, the Hudson Avenue project, for reasons that we discussed earlier in the meeting, I mean, that 2028. Unsure how realistic that is. That's the only other one that I wanted to call out.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to sort of, in my mind, depend on where we are with 25 Worcester Street. If that goes well, then, you know, we can approach Hudson Ave again, you know, bang our heads against that wall every once a decade. That's fun.
We just have to come up with other ways to get to the number if we take it out.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, there's some projects here that pretty much are the entire nut that you need anyways. It's just whether or not they come to fruition. So
Right.
How many,
we'll just take credit for those when they come out.
what's that chapter number that I'm forgetting about farmland that comes out of
61A.
60A?
61.
61.
61A. Yeah, I mean, there's another thing we haven't discussed. I mean, I would anticipate more 61A property becoming available over the course of the next 10 years than, trying to get a hold of Hudson Avenue. But that's a whole other thing.
We have seen a lot of requests to remove land from chapter status as of late.
Yep.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments, concerns, or anything?
Sorry, just one more. So Karen, so I mean, just thinking from the perspective of MBTA communities, I mean, 15 units an acre by right minimum density. I mean, that's going to be, if we just use those numbers, I mean, that's pretty significant. Like we don't have, like we have like 18 slated, or sorry, we have, well, obviously it'll be what's counted on the SHI, and that'll be dependent on projects, but I mean, we're using 5 separate, sub-districts for our entire overlay.
We can add. I mean, these are the comments I'm looking for. We can add, more units to, we have the development of privately owned property, 3A. On year 4, the mixed use development also could be, well, that's 25% affordability. So that's something else. But we can add, more units.
Well, I'm just thinking so we're using the whole village mixed use gateway district for compliance with MBTA communities. And we already have, we'll be discussing this later, but we'll be, there's a good amount of units that are slated to go on that 17 and 27 Upton site. And 25% of those, I mean, I believe it was 120 units. Sorry, I haven't looked at the 120 units at 25% affordability. In addition to, I mean, obviously there's been complications with 8 Pine / our North Grafton Transit Village Overlay District 40R, but they are in the process of trying to move that along as well. I mean, those two projects combined significantly raise the numbers here. So, and we can talk offline, Karen, about it. But
yeah, let's do that, and let's make the changes that are appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to root it in what's going on currently. So obviously it's realistic. I mean,
yeah.
17 and 27 Upton, for example. I mean, they presented concept plans to the planning board on the 10th of July. Still haven't filed yet, but these types of things they're moving, and I think that they'll add a significant increase to the unit counts here. So. Just wanted to point that out. I mean, just with my MBTA communities hat on.
Yeah. Well, let's
just as long as the emphasis is pointed on when we
put it in.
We get a comprehensive permit on these. They count. We check our box as far as a municipality is concerned, but that doesn't necessarily translate into real people getting into affordable homes, because that's the next step. That's way out of our purview. So, echoing what Ed said is when people look at this and then they're saying, "Oh, well, you're applying for another, a LIP or whatever. We already have all these in the pipeline. We expect to be full at that point. We don't want to hear the next proposal. Just as long as you don't get trapped into a scenario like that, which has happened." So,
Well.
Andy. 1 second.
There's one thing about having a developer come in and propose a LIP where 25% of the rental units are actually affordable and the rest are market, vis-a-vis a project like 25 Worcester Street, or potentially a project on Millbury Hudson Street where you can, apply for multiple layers of state subsidies, so you get much more affordable units and targeted to lower income tiers. And so those are important distinctions.
Okay. Andy?
select board had a joint meeting with Open Space and Rec fairly recently. We're kicking off some work with CMRPC on that stuff too. And I believe some of that was going to be mapping things like chapter land and creating different overlays so that we could kind of toggle through, what would be available and what the town currently has, what is currently in town, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be some information that could be shared with the trust as well and mutually beneficial.
Right.
Perfect.
Absolutely. We did have a, thanks Andy for bringing that up. Yeah, we did have a meeting with the Open Space and Recreation Committee, invited a few other groups to select, a good portion of select board members were there. Yeah, I mean, it's an open space parcel prioritization project. So, and the criteria has been developed, scoring criteria, as well as guidelines for that mapping process the CMRPC will be undertaking. But yeah, it's definitely pertinent, and I can send you, Karen, what's been done thus far. We've been looking at a variety of data sets in GIS, and kind of already talking about we haven't talked in depth about multiple parcels in town that we would look at for open space specifically. There's been a couple, but none that have intersected with anything that I saw in this plan yet. So, but yeah, I will send that definitely so that we're on the
Great.
same page. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona.
So just to wrap up the conversation, so Amber's going to send out some preliminary dates to the host of people we're going to need for the next outreach meeting, and see if we can make those first 2 weeks in November work. Karen, could you just send an email to Amber and let her know which week you're going to be gone?
Yeah.
And then we'll work around that. Does anybody else have anything? Yes, we got a couple more things on the agenda that we need to get to before it gets too long in the night.
No, I mean, if there are any, either substantive or stylistic edits that we want to make, Karen, can we just email those to you and then we can talk about them in the next round?
Sure.
Okay. But I do want to say, I mean, I've been through a few of these now, Karen, and this is, I think, one of your best drafts. This is really well written and very thorough. So I want to thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I figured with all the comments, I'll revise the draft and I'll do a PowerPoint presentation for the second community meeting that you all can digest.
And just one last point about the workshop. When I know that we've typically used Apple Tree Arts, I'm trying to expand our options here. The library is out because of recent flooding issues. The other areas, South Grafton Community House, Senior Center. If anyone has any suggestions of venues that they want me to look into, obviously it's going to depend on what's available and the date that we choose, but I'm happy to do some research and look at other areas. But if people like Apple Tree Arts and want to,
yeah, that was great.
That's a good forum. One should use it.
The parking can be obviously a little challenging. I know that's I've received a lot of feedback about that issue specifically, so I'm trying to.
You know what, Fiona?
Look at other
It's
options.
charm.
I don't know if you've ever looked at using the community barn.
Okay, yep.
That's a good idea too.
I'm looking at that for an economic development meeting, so that's why it popped in my mind.
Yeah, no, I believe I do have a point of contact there, so that's perfect. And I think that they can hold up to at least 50 people. I mean, that should be good. Okay, awesome.
Everybody here is probably not gonna care. Just tell us where to go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Karen, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
and,
it.
Thank
we will be in touch.
you. In touch soon. Great.
Thanks.
Good night, Karen.
Fiona, for the next piece, if you want to hang out for this briefly, it might be beneficial for you. If not, then by all means. But of course.
Oh no, I'm here for the full meeting.
We're waiting on one person to log in, but I'm not going to wait for him. So if he's not on by now, then
Yeah. Fiona, did you hear from John today?
No,
Okay.
I did not. No.
He must be stuck in the pipeline.
yeah, it's definitely fine.
Is John grant available?
Well, the whole point was
Yeah,
to have all the parties in the room so we didn't have to do this over like 30
Yeah.
different email threads or whatever.
Mhm.
So, but it's 9 o'clock now, so he can watch the tape.
Okay.
Okay.
Who is there for this discussion item? I'm sorry.
So we have a couple of people from the Historic District Commission.
Okay, great. Yep.
They're not in a quorum. Not that it really matters to me. So, is it John Grant? Oh, well, that's not helpful.
Those are my compatriots.
All right, so let me just preface this discussion real quick. So we have some members of the Historic District Commission with us tonight. There was some dialogue back and forth concerning the barn that's on 17 or 27 Upton Street. I forget which parcel. There was some concerns and some things that they wanted to make sure were brought to light. The purpose of this meeting was just so they included the trust in the discussion, seeing that we're partners, and especially the front end part of this particular project. So I invited them here and John here as well. There's one other caveat to that. There are two separate commissions in town. One is specific to the common area in that district. They're here tonight. And then there's the Historic Society. Thank you very much. Are also an entity that have some concerns up here as well. So we will get to that when we can. But for the time being, if you three gentlemen want to come up here and sit up here so it's a little easier to have a discussion. What I basically want is just to tell us what you found, tell us your concerns, just so it's a place that we can do that. Have it on the public record, so to speak, before we get too far along in a special permit process and encumber the whole thing with stuff that everybody should have known about. Anyways. So just for the record, they are not in a quorum. They all happen to be members of a commission. I'm not asking them to deliberate or take any action on anything that they're doing. I'm just asking them here to talk about what they've learned. So, but I will ask you to introduce yourself. We have some new members here and our representative from the CMRPC.
Paul Scarlett. I am the clerk from the Historic District Commission.
John Stevens, I'm a member of the District Commission.
Brad Schlepak, a member.
Okay. So now that everybody's introduced, tell us your concerns, what your thoughts are on the barn. If this is, this has been a long drawn out process. It's gone on for a couple of years. It's gone to town meeting a couple times. Now it's at the point where we're preparing a special permit submittal for the site. Is something that the trust has a very in-depth interest in, seeing that we are partners with GSX. Whichever you wants to take. John, I know most of the emails came from you. If you want to take point.
Like, wanted to get a handle on where things are, because the initial proposal was that that building was going to be retained and developed into the
Beer garden.
a beer garden. That was an example of what it could be used for. My concern is that I'm looking at Pine Street and I'm not seeing anything. All the buildings are gone. The DPW is okay. That's not a concern if that goes away and that's an empty lot for 20 years. But I don't want to see the barn taken down and not have an opportunity to save it and reuse it for a better, another purpose, and just have it taken down and then it's gone.
We realized that there was a recent meeting where the contractor was there and talked about raising it and was saying it was not of any historical significance. It is the entryway to the historic district. It's technically not in the district, it's just outside of it, but it is the entryway to it. And so it definitely impacts the look and feel of the common, which is why we have that concern.
It's a buffer zone, just every entry to the common, because the common literally is just the buildings that ring the common. And so as you drive into town, whatever road you're on, Millbury Street or North Street, South Street, Upton Street, Worcester Street, anything that you're funneling into the common, we want to have that character feel not just abrupt at the line, but as it moves out or moves in, that you know you're in an important part of town, and we want to maintain that feel. And the barn has been there since the 40s, at a time when the street wasn't even there. And that's it's important. When I first found out about this, and that same week, two barns were taken down, at least partially, one and another one on Millbury Street and one on Providence Road. So those aren't even in the center of town. This is a very rare thing to find a barn that's close to the common in the center of town. One of the things that Paul had mentioned, and I don't know what meeting, that they were talking about tearing down the
fire station.
The fire station. And where are they going to store the equipment? I believe the school department stores things in that building. And Paul said, well, why not store them in the tree barn? You know, it's like you're just trading one building for another. And as you mentioned, parking is tight right behind the townhouse. That would give you parking right where it's needed.
It's just another option. We wanted to make sure that you guys were considering that piece of it. I'm not even sure what the status is on the barn right now. I don't think it's town owned now. Is it now GSX owned?
It's under agreement. So just for some historical perspective on that particular site, it originally went out to bid without the any restrictions on the barn as it was. There was some talk about it, what they could do with it, but nobody had ever looked at it, see if it would structurally support that idea, if you could actually pull it off. And eventually, when it went out to actual bid, they removed it completely. So the bid that was awarded didn't have any restrictions on the barn. It could be pretty much used for whatever they wanted. When it went back to town meeting for the second time, nobody said anything there either. So now that it's in the special permit process, with the type of units that the trust wants to see put in there, so we get the most affordable out of it, it would be much better for the reserve parking to go there, which is
Reserve parking for,
the unit, but it's quasi-public parking.
so it's like 4 houses away for people that are going to park.
Well, it's reserve parking. So essentially what it boils down to is there's restrictions in our bylaw that says per unit you need a certain amount of parking spots. In the real world, how people use these, you don't necessarily need that. So our bylaw allows for, and Fiona, stop me if I'm wrong, about 20% of your total parking quota to be reserved. And Dave, you're here too, so you can stop me, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. That would be an ideal situation because that would allow us to preserve site and property that's on the main part to build more houses. And of course, these are all vertical anyways, so from a building size perspective, you're not really having that much of an impact anyways. I went through the barn. I've known about the barn for a long time. It's a barn. I don't believe there's anything that you could do there that would be financially wise to retrofit it. I think the idea at the time, as we were talking about it at the table, was, oh, well, these are some great ideas, but no real follow through on what could actually work. So, you know, in my mind, I didn't know what you were thinking about as far as perhaps moving it to another location, preserving it that way, like we did for the bank down in South Grafton, you know, something on those lines. It's a little bit 11th hour, and I understand completely how this works. But from my perspective, I don't see it going over to the school department or being sent back to the town. I think it's an essential part of this particular project, and I think in the end of the day, I think it makes the project work. It also provides some of that quasi-public parking pretty close to the common, or just as close as it would be if you knocked down the building, old fire station, which from a historical perspective, I think has a lot more validity than this.
You're saying the fire station is historical?
Well, as far as something that was functionally used, it still looks like it was. I mean, I don't care either way, honestly. I don't find the redeeming qualities here for something that we're gonna save at the expense of, more affordable units.
Let me ask, can I just ask a question? What is the historical significance of the barn? You mentioned look and feel, and you mentioned, 1940, that's not particularly old.
Anything that's 50 years or older is considered historic for Mass Historical Commission purposes. So
Huh.
it's not like it's got to be 500 years old or even 100 years old. It's 50 years old.
Okay, I mean, at 50 years old, we're going back to 1960 now.
Right, and that's what is shocking to most of us because if you grew up in a house, it's probably historic
Right.
based on Mass Historical standards.
I think that the thing that, listen, I understand where you're coming from a historical perspective. I grew up in Salem, Massachusetts. Every other building, I guess, is historical. In fact, I would think most of it now. When I grew up there, there was sort of always a difference between the Witch House, the Pickering House, the House of Seven Gables, and all that stuff. That's the Custom House, genuinely historic buildings. And then most of the houses in my neighborhood were old federal buildings. And outside you see the plaque on them, built by James Cook, 1796. And, that had a historical value to it. But, we have to balance these things between, preserving everything that just happens to be a little bit older and in this case kind of dilapidated, with being able to serve a genuine community need here, which is housing. So, that's the balance we're looking for. And I fundamentally disagree with parking minimums. I don't think we particularly need them, but if the bylaw is the bylaw, and it's going to promote the development of this site that we've been sitting here trying to develop for, I don't know how many years now, 4 years now, then this is something that's under consideration. But I understand where you come from.
The building itself has an interesting history. Dick Anderson, who lived on Old Upton Road, but I think grew up on North Street. Mary O'Hara's family owned the house that was attached to this, which is the first house on North Street. And so this was the barn that went to that house. And the barn was actually, I think he had said that the original barn burned. The new barn was constructed, and during the Depression, or not the Depression, but during World War II, when there were restrictions on all kinds of things that you could buy because of availability for the war effort, they ran a black market cattle out of that barn. And the story was, and I've tried to get the information from the assessors to see if I can document this, that so this was all black market. They were selling cattle or beef, but they didn't pay their taxes. So that is how the town got the barn.
How old's the fire station?
I think that's probably from the 30s or 40s.
All right. So based on age alone, that's equally historically significant as probably this.
I think it's probably more.
Well,
likely
it's
that-
the
I disagree. It's
history
in
is
the
it's not
50s.
the age of the building. It's what took place there or what's architecturally significant about that building.
Okay.
And that's something I quite honestly, it's like I'll work hard to save this. I've had other people say that will help me, but I'm not going to waste any time that I do not have for you guys just to knock it down. If that's what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen. But I would go back to Tammy and say, I need that information from the assessors. I need that. I'll get an architect in town to come and tell me about the construction of the building, because that's a unique building the way it's been constructed. It's not just a regular post and beam barn. But I'm not going to waste my time just for grants. If it's going to have some meaningful result to where it will at least be considered, then that's a different story.
Yeah, I think that if the town actually had, the town has had several iterations of figuring out what they wanted to do with it. And you folks know just as well as I do, the town's appetite for spending money on projects like this is, next to nothing. So if it's not coming out of CPA, or if it's not coming from an individual, like South Grafton Community House where you have 2 or 3 people fill in, the players, willing to step up and do most of the work on their own. This has just sat there.
And I've been working with a nonprofit group that is interested, and the only way that this works is it works for the town, it works for the nonprofit, and it works for the developer. So the developer would be a tax deduction because they would have to donate the building.
So I cannot speak for GSX. What I can say is the trust has committed a substantial amount of capital for this process, and we are on the understanding of what this, project is going to look like. If you were to take this and would make a substantive impact on what we can accomplish as far as unit density in the project that we've already committed cash to, I don't think we're going to be on board with it.
Bruce, what changed from the original plan? Because the original plan, I believe, had parking configured differently, obviously, because it wasn't factoring in tearing down the barn. We, in fact, sent a letter supporting the project, and I believe we referenced the fact that we liked the fact the barn was staying.
I think there was some general concept and ideas without people actually in the field delineating wetlands. So I think just like most of the time what you see is people that haven't actually committed to survey work that's at that stage or that level of engineering where they can have a substantive conversation. You just get people that come in the room and say, oh yeah, this is great, let's put a beer bar here. Let's put another drive-through Dunkin' Donuts, that'd be awesome. Then we'll get a nice mix of commercial. But as you've seen in most of these things, what sells in our town is residential space. People
So
aren't going to spend the money on
The land where the little house used to be, the bank, which is green now, that's all gonna be paved, that's all gonna be parking lot.
So you would have to, I can't say
'Cause
that
that's even worse.
in-
We're losing a building and we're losing green space. And so all we're gonna get is blacktop.
Well, so that's part of the stuff that's going to go through the special permit process, and they'll hold public hearings for this application, and you can talk about those type of things. There are certain amounts of impermeable surface which you are allowed on a lot of that size. So
Oh, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying that's not the way we wanna see people coming into the common. It's just saying blacktop.
okay,
That's my concern, not whether it's allowed by zoning, because I'm sure it is. You've got blacktop everywhere. It's like you need parking, but right now it's green and it's a historic building.
Well, I mean, just with due respect, part of the thing, I don't like GSX discussions because they're never here. I can't carry water for what their design concept is going to be, so I can't tell you what's going to be there. I mean, I know housing is going to be there, and that's my concern. But I get it. You want something pleasant to look at as you're driving into an historic district and the gateway to the common. Joe, the former town planner, used to make a big deal about the gateways to Grafton, so I understand. But there's only so much we can say about what the design's going to look like without these people here, and frankly, they're never here, which is irritating.
So let me, I guess, ask, like, what is your ask here from the
Well,
trust?
one,
specifically?
it sounds like this is kind of done. The horse is out of the barn, so to speak.
The PNS is signed.
But I was, hopeful that there was an opportunity for the developer to say, hey, we could work something out. But it sounds like you need this, want this for parking, so all of that between the post office and the railroad tracks is gonna be parking. And that's, and what concerns me more about that, not that it's gonna be parking, is that they'll tear it all down and then they'll pull a Pine Street. That's what concerns me.
okay, so just briefly, so everybody at home knows, the Pine Street has a long convoluted process to it. For one, we picked it up about 12 years ago, and we struggled for about 3 years to pull it out of DCAM, who didn't take any care of it. In the process of us going through the DCAM and the 40R process, which is a long process from a municipality's perspective, the roof collapsed. So nobody was taking care of the building, and then we had a big snow set year, and it destroyed the place. So the buildings that were knocked down had to be knocked
Well,
down.
The ARC group, because the historical commission, the other group, was in favor of that group because they had planned in part of their proposal to retain two buildings.
That's-
So it doesn't sound like, it's all water under the bridge.
Yeah, I
But the
understand
problem
that.
is it's sitting there, not even just flat. It looks horrible. You've lost your safe harbor. That's my concern, is that I don't want to lose this building for no good reason. if,
He doesn't want it to sit like that, torn down and, you know, just rubble and
You don't want to, gouge
sit
on,
there
on
for
okay.
months and years like that.
I guess that's something that we can convey. It's not something we have a lot of control over, but, Pine Street is a separate thing. I understand the two entities are the same that own both properties, but they're very, very different projects and they have a very, very different history to them. So, and when you enter the public bidding process, there was only 3 bidders on the you're stuck with who was going to win the bid. So, I mean, it worked out how it worked out. I understand, but it was also, a collapsed, dilapidated building for a good.
even all the trees are gone, every tree. And then there
Again.
were huge trees along the street. Again, those didn't have to come down
Well, they were going to come down eventually.
to clear the site. Well, I mean,
See, okay.
again, I look at development differently. It's like, I want to, I'm not a tree hugger, but I want to see trees. They cut them all down to build the $1 million houses, which I don't get. Just down the street. It's,
We're
So-
losing ourselves. In
no,
the
but
thing.
I don't want to see that a flat lot.
You don't want
for
us
no
to knock down the
reason.
barn before it gets to the point where it has to be knocked down.
Right.
Well, that's an easy concern. Fiona, you had your hand up for a little bit.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of do a recap of, so the facts as I understand them is that when this RFP went out, GSX was the only respondent. At the time, they did say there was mention and language of very not very comprehensive, but there was some language that hinted toward the barn being historic when the RFP was issued, and also in the response from GSX, they did say that they would examine options to reuse. Obviously, conversations change, and it was something that was mentioned when they came before the planning board on the 10th of July. There was concept plans presented that had the barn in place and also parking. Obviously, I understand, and I wasn't here for all of the back and forth. I'm just, again, relaying the facts as I understand them. Ultimately, historic character and those types of elements are looked at by the planning board, which will be the special permit granting authority for this, as well as a reserved parking provision. So if GSX does state a case saying, demonstrating a need for parking and, follows the regulations for reserved parking as they're supposed to, that is something that they can do. I know that at the time that when this conversation was being had, the prior planner, Mr. McGoldrick, had relayed to me that there was some discussions that were had, and this is just me for the record putting it out there, and I want to kind of digest this with both parties now that everyone's in the room, but there was a discussion to document prior to the potential demolition of the structure, documented in some way, to have a record that preserves the history and memory and technical details. There was also discussions that the structure could be relocated or portions of it reused at another site. And then the kind of third option that was floated was rehabbing or expanding the existing structure in situ as conceptually proposed, if feasible. So, again, I just want to lay those facts out so that it's clear to everybody that there was discussions in the past. Obviously, the purchase and sale has been issued. The planning board does have the right to, exert discretion over this topic as well. But, in terms of John Stevens having discussions with a nonprofit group, I'm not privy to any of the any recent findings. Again, we don't need to keep going back and forth about it, but obviously the barn is not in the historic district specifically. And when I was doing my research there, I couldn't find it cataloged in any historic inventories. I mean, there is obviously some historic significance to it. I don't think that GSX is completely opposed. What we're dealing with now is that we need to come to a consensus before they file their special permit with the planning board, because if this is, still up for discussion, it's going to basically drag out the public hearing process. The planning board is going to need to evaluate and look at this, and ultimately they're going to need to establish if the barn, set conditions around the barn. But that is how I understand this is played out, and this is what's gotten us here today. If somebody in the room has had a discussion with Mr. McGoldrick and something was agreed upon that I don't know about, I would like to know, out of the three scenarios that I just discussed.
I would say that the other.
I think this is going off the rails.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Dave, real quick.
Just a
Like, all this is outside of our purview.
little bit more perspective on the history of this project. As Bruce pointed out, there was, when we put this property up for bid, for RFP, we preceded that with some public workshop we held up at One Grafton Common to explore different ideas for what might be done with this property. And the consensus that came out of that was ideally a mixed commercial residential use, with or without the retention of the barn. That was sort of not a primary focus. But subsequent to that, then, when we issued the RFP, as has been pointed out, the RFP did not have any specific requirements for preservation of the barn or other particulars. The one RFP response we got from GSX proposed, their initial proposal they kind of sketched out was a mixed use building somewhat roughly configured similar to what they're currently proposing, but was largely commercial on the first floor, parking underneath, and residential up above. Now the parking underneath part is critical to that, because that way they got the parking they needed without having to occupy the entire property with parking. That part, the structured parking underneath, did not survive the financial viability analysis. So they basically had for the project to remain viable, they had to give that up, which meant more surface parking, and that's kind of led to where the design is now. In hindsight, 2020 hindsight would say that when we issued the RFP, if at the time we put that together, the right people considered the barn to be of sufficient value, we could have structured it differently to require preservation of the barn. Possibly that would have led to no RFP responses and nothing happening there. You can't know that. You can't. It's too late. But that's kind of a little bit more of the history behind this and how we got to where we are. We had what I thought was a nicer looking project at the beginning. I don't like it quite as well now, but it's the financial reality has driven it in that direction. Yeah. For what that's worth.
I don't recall the prior session that he was talking about, but we were asked, there was a communication that went out to various committees asking for input on the plans that they had proposed, and we did respond to that. So that's when it first became known to us. But as you're proceeding with this, there's a lot of dialogue going on in town right now about that fire station, and whether or not it should be torn down to allow for parking, or if it should be preserved and continue to be used for the purpose that they're using for it right now, which is for the school department to store their equipment. The highway barn, which is this barn, has been used to store equipment for years for the town. Has there been any consideration at the town's level of looking at the viability of using that instead of the fire station, so that you could potentially accomplish both things?
I would say they probably can't at this point. It's under agreement. And furthermore, just to tie it into the trust relationship with GSX, we're 50-50 partners on the soft costs of this. So the trust has pledged $1.8 million to their $1.8 million. And here's where it ties in. You get into a special permit process. We don't talk about this up front. We go to a public hearing with the planning board, and the planning board says, well, this is the first we're hearing of it. They kick the planning board out, and they say, we want some more drawings. We want to see some viability here. They go back and they go to their engineers, and they spend about $25,000 or $30,000, and 15 comes out of our kitty to spend that. So that's why we're here tonight, to see if we can, understand each other, and then everybody knows what everybody's talking about. So when we do get into that process, we're going to tell the planning board, yes, We reached out, we had a conversation, this is what their concerns are, we're gonna try to mitigate as many of those concerns as possible before we get to the planning board. Because I've spent a lot of time on the planning board, I've spent a lot of time in this process, and I've seen how these things go. And from my perspective, these type of things, when you don't get ahead of them, they cost you 3 or 4 months in a public hearing process, which is time that I don't get back. So I do enough of this as it is. So I thought this was a nice way to kind of air out things. So what I'm gathering from you folks is you want to see if there's something financially viable there. I don't believe there is, but
Have they actually submitted plans that are like a second
so
stab
they've
at it?
submitted some of their engineering and survey and wetlands delineations to the Conservation Commission. They've had a preliminary meeting with the planning board for the iterations that they have. Now we're in the process and we're gonna pay some more bills a little later in tonight for the actual submittal and the architectural renderings, the site plan, all of the instrumental pieces of getting and navigating through the town permit process, including the special permit process.
But do those plans include parking on the, where the side of the
You'll
barn is?
probably
We don't
see-
have 'em yet, I don't-
Yeah, we
we
don't
don't
have them that, but what you'll see is a kind of a fluid document, which, you know, maybe we'll have 50% of that site as impermeable surface, maybe less. They'll show some, you know, renderings, all that stuff in generally what fits there, what they think will actually work, and they'll expand it accordingly to the unit count and how much they can get, as far as wetlands considerations from Concom.
But all that, I mean, this is a process that's going to take place at the planning board level, right?
Right.
It is.
Yeah, so like, we're having thank you for coming in, but I feel like we
No,
can't
but-
even help
Well,
you.
the
Like,
problem
there's
is
nothing we
that
can do to.
this has gone on so long that if we waited until planning, then that would waste a lot of time with them saying, okay, well, redo this and try this and think about that, and it will cost you more money. So it's like, we're jumping in even late at that point.
Well,
No,
now.
that's how the process goes though for every development, you know?
No, but it's like, to
I tell you
Bruce's
what.
point, so that does not
We're gonna
happen.
wanna be involved with the planning board when they meet to talk
It's a
about
public
this.
hearing, everybody
Yeah.
can
So-
be involved in it, so it's,
But at
When
this
it-
When
when
point,
they'll
comes,
make sure
you'll
that
have it.
the Historic District Commission is aware of it and is invited, because
It's-
sometimes we're forgotten on
it's
things.
a public hearing, everybody there is gonna get, certified mailing, and it'll be posted in all the, and you'll be paying attention to it, I'm sure. What I'll do, and Eric, I'll let you have it in a second. What I'll do is I'll make sure John reviews this particular tape. Goes
When you
through
say
your-
John, who's John?
John Grant is the, principal at GSX.
Okay.
So I will go through the considerations with him and make sure he watches this and says, you know, at the very least, you know, this is what I heard, this is what they said, watch it. If we can accommodate some things going in, at least have some perspective on what they're looking for.
Because
That's
if
about
he's the
best.
one that's driving the bus, the question would be to him, when you talk to him, is there any way that this barn can be saved? That would be my question.
Okay, and I think we've already kind of been there.
Can I weigh in?
Yeah.
Forgive the ignorance, but do you guys have public hearings for historic district?
On occasion, yes.
If,
So
or certain,
I'm not speaking for the trust. My recommendation, we don't have to be the middleman. I would reach out directly to them and say, we have an interest in the preservation of this barn. We will be participating in the public hearing for the special permit. We'd like to invite you to a meeting prior to that process.
I
And-
did that with Fiona, and I don't know that they've responded to her. Have
This
they
was the
responded?
response, they were supposed to be here tonight.
Got it.
No, we were trying to, we were attempting to set up a one-on-one and then ultimately decided to do what we're doing this evening and have a more open forum, obviously.
Well,
Mr. Grant.
then, you
made
know, I think the trust should, we can help in this because it is potentially going to affect us, as you said.
No, it does
Bruce.
affect us right now.
Yeah, yeah. So if they're not responding, we can help out in that.
We
And
gave $1.8 million in a grant for 122 units and 25% of those to be affordable. If they go down to 120 and I lose one affordable house, I want 100 grand back from my grant. And I'm saying I'm just saying from my perspective. I can't speak for the rest of the trust, but we're working on this for 2 years. Our process here is to build affordable homes. This is the opportunity to do so. and we're actually at the finish line, and I don't wanna go through this whole thing to protect the barn. That's just my perspective. You guys
But you
wanna
see,
protect
we're
it.
from a different, you're representing one
understand.
group,
And
we're
this is-
representing another group.
That's what I was just getting to, is this is my perspective on it. I don't wanna say.
And we're not trying to stop you from doing that either.
But this is also not in the district.
Yeah, but to your point, if GSX is not aware of this, then it could be potentially delayed down the line, which will cost us money.
Yeah, which is why I wanted them to be here.
Yeah. So I think we have an interest in facilitating this preparation. If they're not responding to you guys, like, that's not acceptable to me.
Yeah.
We can help out because we have their money.
Yeah, why don't
That's
we tell
how-
them,
that's
why don't
how
we
I
tell
do
them
it.
we'll sign their bills when John comes in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm losing.
I have a lot of questions about the invoices actually, so I'd like to get to that.
Okay,
I appreciate you guys listening.
Yep,
thank you for coming in.
Thanks,
And
guys.
I was looking on my phone, so it's hard to, and I couldn't see, but when you were talking about the $10,000 for rental assistance, and it had the trust, it's the housing authority that's operating that program.
The Housing Authority is,
Yeah.
This,
They're
that is,
administering it.
it's, that they send us a bill. I just talked to Mary
Sure.
to let her know,
okay,
you know, the housing authority will send you a bill and I'll approve it and you, so we're not seeing, just like when we did the other rental assistance during COVID,
okay.
but it's the housing authority that's actually running the
We'll
program.
get that feedback back to
Yeah,
the appropriate channels.
like a pass-through entity here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck,
Thanks for
you guys are
coming
doing good work.
I'll keep the communication lines up. Obviously, I was more hopeful about attendance tonight. So it would have been a little bit easier. The issue.
Good night.
Thank you.
Guys.
Too. Briefly, Fiona, I'm sorry, the 40R is in here too.
You also had
Yep, no problem.
fee waivers.
Yeah, I don't care about that tonight. We're past that
Okay.
over. I don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah, happy to discuss that.
Yeah, just give us a quick overview. I know I
Yep.
have my position on it, but this is probably the first that some people here have heard of it.
Sure. Yep. So the town was approached by Claremont developers, represented by Mark Bobrowski, who has extensive experience in 40R development. And they were interested in doing a amendment to our North Grafton Transit Village overlay district, which is the 8 Pine site, which is currently a 40R. They wanted to add a sub-district B, which is what 5 Millennium is currently proposed as. This was the sub-district B was a reserved section of the zoning that was written in initially when the North Grafton Transit Village zoning was passed at town meeting. So they approached us. They had been kicking around ideas of what they wanted to do. They came before us with a 40R, and they were going to do a 40B, and then they just ultimately decided to do a 40R because of the benefits to the community and also the ability for the planning board to be the plan approval authority for the project. The site is challenging. For those who are not familiar, it is a parcel of land that's located in Centec Park, originally zoned office light industrial. It was part of a master plan process in the 90s. The area hasn't taken off and been able to support the office light industrial uses that it was originally zoned for. We see this as a great opportunity for the town to obviously get a site that is challenging in terms of slopes, et cetera, built and create much needed housing in the community. They're proposing 233 units at 20% affordability. As part of the proposal, the town gets incentive payments as well as the ability to get bonus unit payments, which is not available through the 40B process. Also, the added benefit is that, as I mentioned, the planning board is going to be the plan approval authority, which basically that means that they are the entity responsible for the site plan review process. where it stands today is we actually received an A&R application from Claremont Developers. They're going to be modifying the lot lines. They're going to be extending into the into 9 Millennium Drive to get their minimum developable area that they need. There has been multiple conversations with the planning board prior to presenting the application to the select board, which I believe, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, was mid-July, July 17th. Talking about concerns, obviously the affordability percentage came up and was discussed ad nauseum, and ultimately for, you know, some of, ultimately they said basically that due to issues with financing, cap rates, interest rates, and just basically the cost of development going up, they are unable to accommodate a 25% affordability. So we wouldn't be able to get all 233 units on the SHI, but we will be able to get the 20%. In addition, we are using, this is an ideal opportunity to use the site as a sub-district for our MBTA communities compliance, which strongly discourages going over 20% affordability anyway, because it, you know, the state wants to make sure that we're creating viable opportunities to meet the minimum density. It's right behind the train station. From our perspective, you know, the town administrator, planning department, et cetera, you know, it's a win. Obviously, we would have liked to see that 25%. And we've had, you know, we've had the discussions. They're unable to accommodate it, but we're thinking if we can tick off the majority of the boxes, then that's good for the town. The select board voted to endorse the application and send it to the state for review. It's currently being reviewed by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. Representative Bill Rayall, we have not received a letter back yet about the status. It's still under review. I did submit a placeholder to the fall town meeting warrant article to have this basically on the docket. And but if we do not receive the letter from the state, we cannot move forward with the proposing this at town meeting, because it's that is a requirement. So that's where we stand. You know, once I hear back from the state, I will make sure to provide an update. But ultimately, yeah, that is where we're at. That's the history, and I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns and relay anything. You know, they are very, Claremont is a good developer. They have been great to work with, and they've actually been very accommodating and considerate to a lot of our concerns. We did have a couple of follow-up meetings after the application was sent to the state with the planning board, where we talked through some things. And obviously, you know, as I kind of keep saying, you know, the planning board has some discretion over that process. So, but, you know, the zoning is proposed at basically the zoning was crafted around this project, which is pretty standard for 40R applications. Typically, towns are you know, typically a developer will approach a town with a project in mind, and then work on the rezoning afterwards. Sometimes, you know, communities will proactively rezone for a 40R district and hoping, you know, if we zone it, they will come. In my experience, and from talking to just other planners in the field, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think, you know, all in all, this was they're a good partner. They're willing to invest in a site that's extremely difficult and costly. And we're meeting our MBTA community goals. We're meeting housing goals, and then we get a little kickback too from the town. So happy to answer any questions.
All right. So this is, if you get the letter back, this will be on the October town meeting warrant. What's on there now, right?
Correct.
All right.
That's correct.
And
there's a placeholder right now, but
the-
if we don't letter, we'll have to pass over it.
When's the planning board's public hearing on it?
So the planning board had public hearings before the select board meeting on the 17th of July, and then there was we also discussed it at our 2 August meetings. yes,
Don't you have
are
another
obsolete.
one that's coming up?
We have public hearings on the zoning bylaws on the 25th.
Oh, sorry, yes, yep,
Public
that's the
hearing on
25th.
zoning bylaw. That's the normal stuff for warrant.
Right,
Okay, just
right.
this is our third go at 40R. The last two, I would say you could have some modicum of success. The one would be Gene Burnett's property down in Fisherville, and the other one is we talked about it, GSX's project on Pine Street. Both got to the points where they were at for different reasons. And the different partnerships. This one, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is basically kind of circumvents the LIP process because they were in a LIP negotiation with us preliminarily when they were talking about that. And I know we were talking about 25% then. So, and from my perspective, and I don't know if it's from the trust perspective, but from my seat on the trust, instead of going and getting 25% through a LIP process, which they would surely go for, or have to, they're going to go to town meeting and get the zoning changed.
Yep, ultimately,
is-
yes, they basically wouldn't
And now they're going
budge on the
20%.
percentage.
So how they, I understand the site is troublesome. It was troublesome before, and I don't know how much they paid for it, but the last iteration there was a commercial application, and that didn't come to fruition, and then it moved to them, and now they've had it for a couple of years now, or over a year at least.
Yeah, I think a year, just about a year.
It never came to the trusts for any real overview, so they never came in to talk to us.
I thought Bill Rail, I'm sorry, not Bill Rail, Bill Lovett from Claremont did
I spoke
do a
with
meeting. Oh, maybe that was when it was the LIP.
And that was it. I spoke with them to set up a meeting with us to see if that was some, a road that they were going to travel. Because, as far from a trust perspective, we see, about a quarter of the LIPs that come in before they actually make it to the select board's desk, which is fine. That's just the way it is. But it's just, it feels like spot zoning to me. It looks like spot zoning to me. And it's all built around an affordability component, which I think we're going to get less out of than if they were forced into a LIP proposal.
So spot zoning isn't really an issue with 40R.
Yeah, no, I get that, and
Yeah.
it's a loose comparison, but it's a comparison I'm going to make because it's in the middle of a commercial area that was designed to be commercially implemented. So now it's going to be a residential neighborhood. So that means the rest of the parcels should have the opportunity to be residential because they probably make more money off their properties that way. When we talked about UPS, years ago, taking the Russell property down at the end of the street, they didn't want all that truck traffic going on Centec. They had to get egress through Shrewsbury. So that was a consideration. So they didn't want, 150, 200 trucks going a day. But now we're opening up to, 100, 150 units or whatever traffic count that's going to be. I don't know. It just, the whole thing strikes me as odd under the purview of affordability. So, and then they never even had a discussion with us about it. I don't know if.
Let's reach out to them and tell them we'll try to tank it at town meeting unless they up it to 25%.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Like, they don't know the town. How are they going to get that passed?
Well, I mean,
If the housing trust says vote against this,
I don't know if that's.
I'm trying to get to a solution here.
I will say that it's a 2/3 vote. And we're probably like 7 people that are going to be there. So I guess it's an instrumental part of the vote.
Fiona, I'm sorry, this conversation's going on a while, so remind me, how many units again are we talking about here? Total?
233.
133 units. We need units. I think sometimes we get in our own way. We just overthink things a little bit. Look, we need affordable units. We need market rate units. We need units. Massachusetts needs units. So let's go.
Or that.
I would agree.
Which is another.
Quibbling over 5%.
Okay, quibbling over 5%. 5% means you get the density for everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it puts you in
true.
a driver's seat in all your other LIP proposals. So there's other things,
Yeah.
broader view.
But
And it could be.
But it wouldn't be a lip but it wouldn't end up being a lip because of,
No, I
road
understand, but they were starting the lip negotiations with the town a year ago. Now they're not, and they get a set amount, and they get a special permit process, as opposed to a ZBA, which all your other lips are doing. So if we're looking at that, why aren't we looking at Upton Street? Why aren't we looking at 25 Worcester Street, and provide us some relief on our property? Which would certainly be helpful when we get into the permitting process. So I would say I'm on board with this. We need units, blah blah blah. Fine, whatever.
It's just our
But-
mission.
If we're looking at this particular parcel, why can't we look at some other parcels as well? If this is an opportunity, and maybe there's some statute limitations. I'm gonna let it die because we got to get out of here, Dave. We'll be at your public hearing.
No problem.
Thank you, Fiona.
You don't really need to hear what I have to say right now.
We'll take it at that.
Yeah, let's,
We gotta wrap this up.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna be frustrated with me that we're at 10 o'clock now anyways. Okay, perfect, thanks, appreciate it. Now everybody knows
Sure.
that's what we're talking about on the 25th, and that's what this article is about.
Yep.
Next thing we got is a bill schedule, which, I think we're just gonna pass over as, show up to the meeting and we'll sign the
Yeah,
bills.
I think that's fair.
I do have a couple questions about the billing.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the right time, but
So
I can send them out to the trust.
I want you to send them to Kathleen,
I will.
because we put her in charge of kind of being the point person on what invoices are good.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of back and forth with them, and I just, you
Yeah.
know, if Kathleen has the structure in mind, just go.
Did we ever get a budget from them? I was looking at my email. I do not see it. So
You know, we
I would.
got a budget and a schedule of events and a whole bunch of things that we kind of kept adding to the list of stuff that needed to provide us.
There's just a little bit of block billing in here for hourly stuff that I had questions about. But we can cover that.
And the first invoices were putrid; they didn't work at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we sent Kathleen back, and I knew you were there. They have worked it out considerably.
Okay.
I also need a timeline, an updated timeline, because we did the thing back in July with the planning board, and we don't have anything further. So we're spending a bunch of money. Where are you at? And they went to Concom, and we weren't there with them. Since we need to have that discussion tonight too. So we need to be privy to all those conversations that are happening in all the different municipal entities.
For sure. It seems like the conversation piece can be a little bit better communication wise.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So that will be on the next agenda. Then we're not voting tonight.
We'll
Okay.
put it on the next one, yeah. Yep. Do we have, meeting minutes? Everybody have a chance to take a look? I'll entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes of July 13th, 2023 as drafted.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just real quick, this is now 2 weeks ago that, Kathleen O'Donnell's working with Worcester, blah, 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 on the PNS. I'd like to see an update on that, by the next meeting.
Sure.
Let's get them locked down. Let's get some signatures.
Okay. I'll put it on the next one to give an update.
All right.
It is in the works, though. Any other discussion? All in favor by roll call, starting with Ed.
Frisbee, aye?
Bruce is an aye. Nicole?
Aye.
Eric?
What are we voting on?
Meeting minutes.
Oh.
Meeting minutes.
Yeah, aye.
Andy?
Jefferson, I.
Now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
There was a gap there.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, starting with Nicole.
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Bruce is a no.
Aye.
Eric? Andy?
Aye.
Oh, well, I lost. So,